Eliza Orzeszkowa, The Argonauts. If you want more audiobooks like this, click support under the video and get early access to all episodes. Chapter 2. He, Darvid, had used him for his purposes. He had liked the man, almost loved him. He had given him great confidence. He had not looked into his character. He had not tried to know him, though he had found time to analyze and know men who took no part in his business. But the fact in this case was that whatever had happened with his own will. From the depth of his bosom, from out their mysterious den, came a coil of snakes, and a repulsive coldness and slime rose toward his throat. Still he reared his head. "There is much truth in what you say. Still my decisive and repeated wish is that you cease to appear in my house." Krenitsky's forehead was flushed with blood, and the words were hissing on his lips when he cried, "In view of such feelings of yours toward me, how am I to explain the service rendered just now? As pay for service which you have rendered me, or my family. I pay, we are at quits, and part forever." "You are not the only power in this world," cried Krenitsky. "Not your will alone can open or close the doors of this house to me." Darvid, so pale that even his thin lips did not seem to possess a drop of blood, took from a letter case and showed Krenitsky, between two fingers, a letter in a small, elegant envelope, bearing the address of Pani Malvina Darvid. The dark flush vanished from Krenitsky without a trace. He became very pale and rested his hand on the arm of the chair. His eyes opened widely. Silence lasted some seconds. Between those two men with faces as pale as linen hung the terror of a discovered secret. Darvid, with a voice so stifled that it was barely audible, was the first to speak. "How this letter came into my hands we need not explain. Simply by chance. Such chances are very common, and they have in them only this good, that at times they put an end to deceit and villainy." Krenitsky, still very pale, except that red spots were coming out on his forehead, looked very old all at once. He advanced some steps and stood before Darvid. The round table alone was between them. With stifled voice, but fixing his black, flashing eyes boldly on Darvid's face, he said, "Deceit, villainy, those words are said easily. Do you not know that in early youth your wife was almost my betrothed?" Darvid's lips were covered with irony, and he said, "You deserted her at command of your mother, when she sent you to this capital in search of the golden fleece." "And when you went to the ends of the earth for it," answered Krenitsky, "you thought proper to place me to guard the woman whom I loved formerly. You considered yourself invincible, even when separated by hundreds or thousands of miles from her." "Let us stop this ridiculous discussion," said Darvid. "As for me," put in Krenitsky with animation, "I will finish it by offering you any satisfaction which you may demand. I await your seconds." Darvid laughed loudly and sharply. "A duel! Do you think that the world would not know the cause of it? Your former betrothed would appear in the matter. For that I should care less, though I must care, for she bears my name, but I have daughters, and I have business." He was silent a while, then he finished. "A scandal might injure my business, and most assuredly would injure the future of my daughters. Therefore I will neither challenge you to a duel, nor will I direct my servants to thrash you." A trembling shook Krenitsky from head to foot, as if from the effects of a blow. He straightened himself, he became manful, and crushing in his hand the bank check which he had received, hurled that paper bullet into Darvid's face so directly that it hit him at the top of his bronze-colored whiskers and fell to his feet. Then, with elastic movement, and with a grace which was unconscious and uncommon, he turned toward the door and strode out. Darvid remained alone. In that spacious, lofty chamber, richly furnished, in the abundant light of a costly lamp, he remained alone. Clasping his inclined head with both hands, he squeezed it with his white, lean fingers, as with pincers. How many vexations and troubles had met him here after an absence of years! There was something greater still than even these vexations and troubles. The coil of serpents rose in his breast and crawled up to his very throat. That was torture mixed with a feeling of unendurable disgust. But Darvid avoided high-sounding phrases and would never think or say, torture, disgust. That was a manner of speaking for idlers and poets. He, a man of iron industry, knew only the words vexation, trouble. What is he to do now with that woman? Throw her out like a beast which, bathed in milk and honey by its owner, has bitten him to the blood? Impossible. His children, especially his daughters, his business, his position, his house, scandals are harmful in every way. So he must live on under the same roof with her, meet the sight of her face, her eyes, those eyes which on a time were for him. Yes, it cannot be otherwise. He must endure that and master himself mightily, so as not to let things reach a scene, or reproaches, or explanation. Naturally, no scenes, disputes, or explanations. For first of all, what can they profit? Nothing save a useless expense of energy, and he needs energy so much. Besides, the very best punishment for that woman is unbroken silence, which will raise between her and him an impenetrable wall. From words, even though they be as sharp as sword edges, some sound may be got, some slight hope of salvation. But silence, concealing hidden knowledge of a deed, is a coffin in which, from the first hour of each day to the end of it, that woman's pride will be placed with all that in her may still be human. Contempt as silent as the grave. She will eat of his millions, seasoned with his contempt. She will array herself in his millions, interwoven with his hatred. Hatred? Oh, beyond doubt, he hates her with passion, and only at times does her name move marvelously through his brain with such sounds as if they were the echo of things very dear, things lost forever and irreplaceable. Can it be? Is it possible that she did that? Malvina, once an ideal maiden, and 10 years later, a woman so loving that when he was going on a journey she threw herself on her knees and wept, and then besought him not to go from her. He remembers the scene perfectly, her hair of pale gold, dropping then in disorder to her shoulders and bosom, her magnificent hair, surrounded by which the tears flowing down her face glistened like diamonds. He raised his head, straightened himself. What stupidity! On what sentiment and exaltation is he losing time and energy? He needs them for something else. He needs to concentrate all his forces to bring his new designs to the desired culmination. Why does that hound not show himself and bring the answer needed? Ah, if he could only get 1 hour of that conversation, he would convince, he would capture, he would overcome rivals and seize into his own sole possession new fields of industry and speculation. There are hindrances, intrigues, dangerous rivalries. He knows of them, and these oppositions it is precisely which attract him most of all. Now especially, with those vexations and troubles, victory and the new work would be as a spoonful of hashish to him, or a glass of strong, invigorating wine. He must go to the club. A game of cards, to which he devotes some night hours frequently, is not specially pleasant, but he plays with persons of high position in society, or with those who are needed in his business. He will find perhaps also that man for whom he has been waiting, vainly, some days. He was extending his hand to the button of the electric bell, when from behind the portieres which half hid the door opening to the interior of the mansion, a thin and timid voice came. One could hardly tell whether it was the voice of a child or a young lady. "Is it permitted to enter?" Darvid went to the door hurriedly, saying, also hurriedly, "It is, it is." At that moment, from the darkness which filled the adjoining room, into the abundant light of the study, came a maiden of 15 years in a bright dress. She was tall and very slender, with a small waist and narrow breast. An immense wealth of pale golden hair seemed to bend back with its weight her small, shapely head somewhat. Her oval face, with its delicate features, had the blush of spring on it. Her lips were like cherries, and under the arches of her dark brows were large dark eyes. Right behind the bright dress of the girl came a small shaggy creature, a ball of ash-colored silk, a little dog. "Kara!" cried Darvid. "Well, you are here, little one. How often have I asked you to come, always boldly? How do you feel today? You have not coughed much, I think. Have you taken your daily walk? With whom did you go? With Miss Mary or Irene? Come, come, sit here in this armchair." He held her small hand in his and led her toward the table, which was surrounded with armchairs. In his movements there was something polished and exquisite, as it were delicacy toward a person who was very dear and not much known, pushed to the degree where it might be called gallantry. Joined with this was a feeling of delight. She was pleased and smiling, but she was blushing and embarrassed. Advancing with short steps at his side, she bent to his hand every moment and kissed it. Her act was full of a timid charm, half capricious. They both looked like persons who were greatly pleased at meeting, but who remained on a footing of ceremony with each other. He received her in his study as a queen. He seated her in an armchair, then, sitting very near, he held her hands in his. Between them, on the edge of his mistress's skirt, sat the dog with the ash-colored coat, in a posture of disquiet and uncertainty. It was evident that he was not accustomed to visit that room. Kara also, with an expression of timid happiness on her lips which were open, cast her glance with a smile on the vases and the walls, uncertain whether she was to speak, not knowing if she might say something. She bore herself very simply. Her small hands rested without motion between her father's palms. At last she said, in a very low voice, "I was so anxious to see you, father dear. I wished so much to speak with you that I have come." "You have done excellently, my little one. Why not come oftener? Your coming gives me great pleasure." While speaking, he looked all the time into her face, which was almost that of a little child. She was so like her mother that Malvina's youth was simply renewed in Kara. But Malvina, when he made her acquaintance, was considerably older. The hair was just the same, very bright, and the eyes with dark brows and pupils, the same shape of forehead. With a deepening of the wrinkles between his brows, he repeated, "Why not come oftener?" "You are always so occupied, father," whispered she. "What of that?" answered he hurriedly and abruptly. "There is reproach in your voice. Are my occupations a crime? But labor is service. It is the value of a man. My children should esteem my labor more than others, since I toil for them as much, or even more, than for myself." He did not even think of speaking to that child with a voice so abrupt and with such a cloud on his forehead, but that cloud came to him from some place within, from a distant feeling of something which he had never looked at directly before. But he hardly knew the girl. When he went away the last time she was a child. Now she was almost full grown. But she, in the twinkle of an eye, slipped from the low armchair to the carpet, and kneeling with clasped hands began to speak passionately and quickly. "Your child is on her knees before you, father. When you were far away she revered you, did you homage, longed for you. When you are here she loves you greatly, above everything." Here she turned and removed from her dress the ball of ash-colored silk which was climbing to her shoulder. "Go away, Puffy, go away! I have no time for thee now." She pushed away the little dog, which sat on the carpet some steps distant. Darvid felt a stream of pleasant warmth flooding into his breast from the words of his daughter, but on principle he did not like enthusiasm. In feelings and the expression of them he esteemed moderation beyond everything. He raised with both hands the girl's head, which was bending toward his knees. "Be not excited, be not carried away. Repose is beautiful, it is indispensable. Without repose no calculation can be accurate, no work complete. Your attachment makes me happy, but compose yourself, rise from your knees, sit comfortably." She put her hands together as in prayer. "Let me stay as I am, father, at your knee. I imagined that on your return I should be able to talk often and long with you, to ask about everything, learn everything from you." She coughed. Darvid took her in his arms, and without raising her from her knees, he drew her to his breast. "See, your cough lasts. Do you cough much? Well, do not speak. Do not speak. Let it pass. Does this cough pass quickly?" It had passed. She stopped coughing, laughed. Her teeth glittered like pearls between her red lips. A gleam of delight shot through Darvid's eyes. "It has gone already. I do not cough often, only rarely. I am perfectly well. I was very sick when I got chilled at an open window while you were away, father." I know. Your enthusiastic little head thought of opening the window on a winter night, so as to peep out and see how the garden looked covered with snow in the moonlight." "The trees, father, the trees," began she, smiling and with vivacity. "Not the whole garden, just the trees, which, covered with snow and frost in the moonlight, were like pillars of marble, alabaster, crystal, set with diamonds, hung with laces. And whenever the slightest breeze moved, a rain of pearls was scattered on the ground." "Great God!" exclaimed Darvid. "Marbles, alabasters, laces, diamonds, pearls. But there was nothing of all this, in fact. There was nothing but dry trunks, branches, snow, and hoarfrost. That is exaltation, and you see how destructive it may be. It brought you acute inflammation of the lungs, the traces of which are not gone yet." "They are," answered she in passing, and then she spoke seriously. "My father, is it exaltation to worship something which is very beautiful, or to love someone greatly with all our strength? If it is, then I am given to exaltation, but without exaltation, what could we live for? An expression of wonder, meditation, thoughtfulness filled her eyes and covered her finely cut face with a freshness like that of a wild rose. With a movement of wonder she opened her arms and repeated, "What do we live for?" Darvid laughed. "I see that your head is turned a little, but you are a child yet, and your trouble will pass." Stroking her pale, golden hair, he continued, "Homage, love, and like things of the sensational sort are very nice, very beautiful, but should not occupy the first place." Kara listened so eagerly that her mouth was open somewhat, and she became motionless as a statue. "But what should stand in the first place, father?" Darvid did not answer at once. What should stand in the first place?" "Duty," said he. "What duty, father?" Again he was silent a while. "What duty?" "Yes, what kind of duty?" "Naturally the duty of labor, hard labor." The flush on Kara's face increased. She was all curiosity, all eagerness to hear her father's words. "Labor for what, father dear? How? For what? For what purpose? For what purpose? Because no one labors for the labor itself. For what purpose? For what purpose?" How that child pushed him to the wall with her questions. With hesitation in his voice, he answered, "There are various purposes." "But you, father, for what are you working?" continued she with eager curiosity. He knew very well for what purpose he wished now to undertake the gigantic labor of erecting a multitude of buildings for the residence of an army, but could he explain that to this child? Meanwhile, the dark eyes of the child were fastened on his face, urging him to an answer. "What is it?" said he. "I labor gives me considerable, sometimes immense profits." "In money?" asked she. "In money." She made a motion with her head, signifying that she knew that this long time. "But I," began she, "if I wanted to work, should not know what to work for. I should not know for what object I could work." He laughed. "You will not need to work. I will work for you, and instead of you." "Well, father," exclaimed she with a resonant laugh, "what can I do? To worship, to love, is exaltation, duty is labor, but if I may not labor, what am I to do?" Again she opened her small hands with astonishment and inquiry. Her eyes were flashing, her lips trembling. Darvid, with marks of disagreeable feeling on his face, reached for his watch. "I have no time," said he. "I must go to the club." At that moment the servant announced from the antechamber, through the open door, "Prince Zeno Skirgello." Delight burst forth on Darvid's face. Kara sprang up from her knees, and looking around, called, "Puff, Puff, come, let us be off, doggy." "Where is the prince?" asked Darvid hurriedly. "Is he here, or in the carriage?" "In the carriage," answered the servant. "Beg him to come in, beg him to come in." In the delight which the unexpected arrival of the prince caused him at that time, he did not notice the expression of regret on Kara's face. Raising the little dog from the floor and holding him in her arms, she whispered, "This is the third time, or the fourth. It is unknown which time it is." Darvid sprang toward her. "You may remain. You know the prince." "Oh, no, father, I flee. I am not dressed." Her white robe with blue dots had the shape of a wrapper, and her hair was somewhat disheveled. With the dog on her arm, she ran to the door beyond which was darkness. "Wait!" cried Darvid, and he took one of the candles which were burning on the desk in tall candlesticks. The prince was coming up the stairs slowly. "I will light you through the dark chambers." Saying this, he walked with her to the second chamber, and when passing through that, she, while going at his side with the dog on her arm, and with her short step, which gave her tall form the charm of childhood, repeated, "This is the fourth time, perhaps. It is unknown how many times it will be in this way." "What will be in this way?" "Just when I begin to talk with you. Paf! Something hinders." "What is to be done?" answered he with a smile, "since your father is not a hermit, nor a small person on this world's chessboard." They went hurriedly and passed through the second chamber. The flame of the candle which Darvid carried cast passing flashes on the gold and polish of the walls and the furniture. These were like tricky gnomes, appearing and vanishing in the silence, darkness, and emptiness. Darvid thought, "How dark it is here, and deserted." Kara divined this thought, as it were, and said, "Mamma and Ira are invited to dine today at—" She gave the name of one of the financial potentates, and added, "After dinner they will come to dress for the theater." "And thou?" inquired Darvid. "I? I do not go into society yet, and so far the doctor forbids me to go to the theater." I will read or talk with Miss Mary, and amuse myself with Puff." She stroked with her palm the silky head of the little dog. Darvid halted at the door of the third chamber, and gave Kara the light, from the weight of which her slight arm bent somewhat. "Go on alone. I must hurry to the prince." She bent down to his hands, covered them with hurried, ardent kisses. With the flame of the candle before her rosy face, with the dog at her breast, and the pale golden hair pushed back on her shoulders, she advanced in the darkness. Darvid returned through that darkness in the opposite direction, and when he had passed the two spacious chambers hastily, he felt in the twinkle of an eye as if from behind, from that interior, some weight had been placed on his shoulders. He looked around. There was nothing but vacancy, obscurity, and silence. "Stupid! I must have the house lighted," thought Darvid, and he hurried into the study, where, with movements a little too vivacious, with a fondling smile, and with repeated declarations that he felt happy, he greeted the prince, a man of middle age, of agreeable exterior, affable and pleasant in speech. When they had sat down in armchairs, the prince declared the object of his visit, which was to invite Darvid to a hunt which was to take place soon on one of his estates. Darvid accepted the invitation with expressions of pleasure, a little too prompt and hearty. But he was never so well able to measure his words and movements in presence of those high-born people as in presence of others. He felt this himself, still he had not the power to refrain. In presence of them, he found himself under the influence of one of his passions, and it carried him too far. The prince spoke of the sculptor, whose gifts he esteemed highly. The young man had gone directly from Darvid to him, and told of all that he had heard and what he had experienced. "I was really affected by your kindness toward this youthful genius, and am delighted that he found in you a patron so magnanimous." Darvid thought that in every case his arrows always struck the mark. To that act of his he was surely indebted for this unusual visit of the prince and the invitation. With a smile, in which honey was overflowing, he said, "That young man seems very ill. A visit to more favorable climates might save him. I must try that he does not reject the means which I shall offer him for that purpose. I foresee resistance, but I shall do what I can to overcome it, out of regard for art, and through goodwill for a young man who, besides many sympathetic traits, has this on his side, that he rejoices in the exceptional favor of Prince Zeno." Had he been able, Darvid would have kissed himself for that phrase. He felt so well satisfied with it, especially when the prince answered with animation, "This, in the full sense of the words, means speaking and acting beautifully. You use the gifts of fortune in a manner truly noble." "Not fortune, prince, not fortune," exclaimed Darvid, "but iron labor." "Such toilers as you are the knights of the contemporary world," answered the prince with vivacity, "the Du Guesclins and Cids of the present century." He rose and, while pressing the hand of that Cid, fixed again in his memory the date of the hunt, which was not distant. Prince Zeno was an aristocrat of the purest blood, possessing a wide popularity which was fairly well deserved. Darvid was radiant. While accompanying the prince to the door of the antechamber, he looked as if no coil of serpents had ever crawled up in his bosom, which was now beating with delight and with pride. The prince halted still a moment at the door, as if to recall something. "Pardon me an indiscreet question, but this interests me immensely. Is there truth in the reports which are circulating in the city that Baron Blauendorf is to have the honor in the near future of receiving the hand of your elder daughter?" The expression of Darvid's face changed quickly. It became sharp and severe. "Were there any truth in the report," answered he, "I should try to destroy it together with the report." "And you would be right, perfectly right," exclaimed the prince. Then he bent his lips almost to Darvid's ear and whispered, "There is no Pactolus which such a young buck as Baron Emil would not drink up. He is a genuine devourer of fortunes. He has swallowed one already and the half of another." He laughed and added at once, with immense affability, "I see your son frequently. That worthy Kranitsky presented him a year ago to us. I and my wife are very, very thankful. He is sympathetic, handsome, and a highly intellectual young man, who does you honor." He went out. Darvid stood at the round table sunk in thought, with pins of irony in his smile and his eyes, with a cloud of wrinkles between his brows. That young sculptor, the favorite of Prince Zeno, with clothing almost in tatters, brought consumption on himself unhindered, till a parvenu appeared with his money-bag and rescued the pocket of the aristocrat, receiving in return a visit and an invitation to hunt. Behold the significance of money. Almost infinite power. Ha! Internal laughter bore him away, and in his brain sounded the word, wretchedness, wretchedness. What was it specially that he called wretchedness? He was not clearly conscious himself of this, but the feeling of it penetrated him. Again he heard the prince saying, "That honest Kranitsky," and a wave of blood rushed to his forehead. Everything that he had forgotten a moment earlier returned to his mind. The prince's voice roared in his ears. That honest Kranitsky. He repeated a number of times to himself, in a hissing whisper, "Honest, honest," and then he said, "Wretchedness." That Baron Emil, the young buck capable of gulping down many a Pactolus, and he was to possess the hand of his daughter, with a considerable part of that fortune won by iron labor. Is Irene in love with him? But the Baron is a vibrio and a monkey all in one. There is need to think over this family matter, lest a misfortune might happen. He cast a glance at the door behind, which was darkness, thick, silent, immovable. It resembled a window opened into a great and impenetrable secret. I must have the house lighted up, thought he. At this moment he heard the dull rumble of a carriage in the gateway as it entered. He pressed the button of the electric bell. Is that the lady who has come? Yes, serene lord. Tell the coachman to wait. He will take me to the club. When the servant opened the door, the rustle of silk came in like the sound of wind. 2 long silken robes passed over the floor of the anteroom, and farther on in the darkness of the chambers, which was dispelled by the light of the lamp, borne by the servant advancing in front of them. The glittering gnomes called forth by that light sprang along the gildings, polished walls, and furniture, ran out of the darkness, ran into it again, were lighted up and quenched on the inclined heads, drooping lids, and silent lips of the 2 women in rich array and gloomy. Remember to subscribe.